along to the way things are right now, again, we had discussions earlier about all of the technologies that are being used to clean things up. There's been a lot of money spent on cleanups, and there's probably going to continue to be a lot of money spent on cleanups. There's also a lot of money going into bonding now for mines. There's an estimate of about $100 million for each large mine that comes on for bonding. I think someone mentioned there was about $15 million to spend to clean up Sunnyside, with another $6.5 million for ongoing studies. So there's obviously a lot of money being spent on stuff that happened in the past. The one thing I've noticed in more recent years is the mining industry is maturing, and it's clicking into that. The more they plan ahead of time and think about things that could happen, looking at what's happened in the past, the acid mine draining issues that happened in the past, and getting an early start on their planning and their mine design, the easier the permitting process goes, the less potential for effects, and the lower the costs in the long run. So that's where they're just starting to get into that. In the last few years, that's really picked up. I won't get into the case studies because I think we're still a little behind on our scheduling. But if anybody wants to talk to me afterwards about any of those, I can talk about some of the things I've worked on. The way things are going, we've had some discussions. I think John mentioned that there's the potential for some new mines potentially in this area coming up. You know, copper prices are going up. There's more exploration coming back on. We're coming up off the slump, so potentially another boom cycle. So, you know, what are we going to do in the future now that we're moving on? Now that we know what we shouldn't be doing, we've seen what's happened in the past. How are we going to work to making sure that doesn't happen again with future mining? So, as I mentioned, there's the costs for remediation keep going up. There's more, people are taking more time, well, it takes more time and more money if you don't plan properly. It's tougher to fix a mistake than to catch it in the early stages. The cleanups that are happening at mines now, more of the easier, and I know that's all perspective, the easier stuff's been done. The harder stuff's coming on. There's going to be more costs for that. We're also seeing a lot more influence from stakeholders and regulatory agencies. Stakeholders have really educated themselves well, which is good, and know the good questions to ask, and also how to help the process. And I know initially, early on in my career, the mining companies were very resistant to getting stakeholders, nonprofits, the communities involved in their mine planning and their operations. But I'm seeing through the years that that's changing, that they realize that people that live in the communities near mines really care about, well, a lot of people that live in those communities work in the mines. They want to see it done right. They want to be sure that they're going to have a future. They want to try and regulate the boom-bust cycle so it's not as steep a drop or as steep an increase. So they're realizing it's important to include those groups in their planning process. So what to do from here, it makes sense for mining companies to do a little more self-regulation. If they're proactive and they look at the effects that their projected operations could have, if they figure out what issues could come up ahead of time, they're ahead of the game because they could potentially redesign. They figure, for instance, they want to put a haul road in, and they go out and we do baseline studies and we identify, oh, this is going to go right through the middle of a beautiful fen. Well, maybe by shifting that road a little bit, they can avoid going in the fen, they can avoid or reduce their environmental effects. And then they don't have to get regulated down the line by the federal government or state or local governments because they've done it themselves, so they have more control over how their operation will work and less input from federal agencies where they don't have as much control. So it's in their best interests to figure things out ahead of time and avoid problems that someone else will regulate for them. So they're starting to key into that. That's definitely becoming more commonplace. As I mentioned, if you don't regulate and start thinking about how your actions will affect your mind working, you can end up being regulated by somebody else. What I've seen that works the best in the work that I do is to get a really early start. Give yourself plenty of time to get your mind designed together. Create a real preliminary design and then present it to a wide group of people. Get all your stakeholders involved. A lot of minds I'm working with have a list of interested parties that have indicated that they would like to be notified if anything is happening in the future. And it includes local community representatives, tribal representatives, agencies, local environmental groups that would like to know what's going to be happening, and then get them together in a room to talk about your preliminary design, because they might go, hey, did you know there's an important cultural site here that you didn't know about? So getting as much information as you can into the system really helps the planning. Do your baseline environmental studies early. I've seen some mine projects get stopped temporarily, their schedules delayed because they forgot to do their cultural surveys. So be sure that you get all your baseline studies done, your biological, your wetlands, your cultural, visual, air quality, water, hydrologic studies, all of your modeling, testing done early on. Get your engineers on the ground with the baseline specialists. A project I'm working on now, we identified some sensitive species habitat. So we met with the engineers in the field and showed them what the problem was, and then some ways that we had thought, well, you can go around it this way or you can go around it this way, and then let them tell us which is the best way for them from a design perspective. So, I mean, several other people have mentioned that collaborative effort, and that really is true. The more you can collaborate, the more information you can get, the more you can work together with the community that you're in as a mining company, the better it works in the long run. You uncover any issues and identify them and figure out how to handle them before they become a problem down when you're almost ready to start breaking ground, and then the problem turns up. Then is not a good time to find out that you forgot to do something. So give yourself plenty of time to figure out any impacts or issues that might come up. Understand what you're responsible for, and there's been a couple of good discussions about what the regulatory requirements are, and most of the mining companies are becoming quite savvy on what's required, and they are. Mining is a very heavily regulated industry, so there's a lot of regulations that they're required to meet and a lot of paperwork that they have to do. So they need to understand what they need to do in the process. Adaptive management is a new buzzword, kind of like sustainable mining, but it really is true, is if a plan that you had isn't working, if you're just trying to push a square peg in a round hole and you can't figure out how to get around a particular area, you can't figure out how to do a wetland crossing or something, figure out another way to do it. And again, working with stakeholders, working with agencies for suggestions on things to do really helps too. I think the more open mining companies become with the community that they're in, the more trust that's developed between agencies, stakeholders, and mining companies, the better it works together. Do your design, review your design, and adjust the design. And again, adaptive management comes into that. Look at the broad picture, try and think to the future. And again, the more recently, I've seen a lot more companies doing that now, projecting ahead, thinking ahead, rather than just going out and going, okay, this is where we're going to put the hole and take the ore out and not doing the planning. Already talked about looking at all of your baseline environmental studies. Communicate to your stakeholders, communicate to the communities that you work in, what's happening. One company, mining company that I'm working with down in New Mexico, has a website that they periodically update on where their mine plans, how they're progressing through the regulatory process, what the periods are that the public has to comment on their regulatory process. So they're very open about where they are in their permitting. And I think that's really helped them get through the hurdles. Consider a broader analysis. Again, kind of reiterating some of this stuff. Do your studies, get the communities involved, get the stakeholders involved. I keep harping on that, but it really, really is true, and it really does help your schedule and your cost. As stakeholders, you really, and I know there's a lot of us in this group too, you need to educate yourselves on what mining is, how mining works, what a company needs to do their job, how they get the ore out of the ground, what their limitations are. Ask good questions. Be constructive. If you get a draft EIS out to review, if you have any concerns, be constructive. Just go, don't just say, I don't like this, we don't want this here. Come up with constructive ideas that if you know that there's going to be a mine light put in, it's going to shine right in your house, we'll offer some ideas on how they could change that or modify it. If you know there's a cultural site that's very important, let them know about it and make some suggestions on things they could do to people that they could contact to find out more information about it. So offer specific guidance. That's very helpful. Offer solutions. And if you do all this, if your stakeholders and the mining companies do all this, if you self-regulate as a mining company, if you include your environmental analysis, your planning and design, you involve your stakeholders, and the stakeholders themselves provide good information back and participate and collaborate, and you build that trust, you'll end up with a lot of benefits, including cost reduction, your schedules will be on time, you'll have fewer fines, potential disciplinary actions, the permitting gets expedited. I've seen time and time again, the agencies, if they trust you, they'll expedite permits. So all of that works to making a community, and working together really will help, I think, mining move forward to the future so that we don't have a legacy in the future like what we have now that we're trying to deal with. So thank you very much.